Hey everybody, it's Kyle here and welcome back to Level Design Breakdown. Now, just a quick recap before we begin. In the last video, I said that where I'm making big changes to the way that I'm going to start uploading things, and that's because I'm going to start my Patreon campaign. So if you'd like to support, keep an eye out for the link that I will post up in my channel. I'll also be creating a video to promote my Patreon campaign. So this will be one of the last few videos that I'll be making for basically the old stuff. Now those videos are going to stay, but don't expect the old playlist to be updated anytime soon. So in the last video, we focused on creating the middle tile sheet. Or if you remember, we had something that looked like this. Let me just bump up the opacity. But we had this, and we essentially built the middle 4 squares, which is this. In today's video, the main focus will be on point 2, transitions and borders. So we'll be creating a transitional block, or the border block, which would be the outside squares. But we'll also be covering things like, the difference between a tile set and a tile sheet. Get to that in a sec. And of course, building a good, let me put that note in, a good tile sheet, good construction. Okay, that doesn't make any sense. We'll put that, should be at the very start. Just leave that there. Good tile sheet construction. So first things first, tile sheet, tile set and tile sheet. What's the difference? Let me pull up an example if I can find one. Okay, here we go. Here is a tile sheet. It's a full tile sheet. So basically, and this will sort of tile in with good tile sheet construction. The difference between a regular tile sheet, which is just a group of whatever, and a good tile sheet is sort of all the tiles you'll be using. Generally, you'll be using all of these tiles in the same place. So if you're making like a desert scene, you'd have most of your desert tiles on the one thing. Or if you're using like, if you're creating like a city scene, then you'd use all the tiles that you would use for your city level or scene or whatever you're making. This is an example of a complete tile sheet. Reminder, this is, disclaimer, this is from RPG Maker VX8. This is not my own. This is just, we're just having a look at what a tile sheet is. A tile set, at least in my opinion, would just be like a small part of the tile sheet itself. So it's not the whole thing, it's just a small part of it. So we've got that out of the way. We can take that off because we're done. Now the transitions and border. I'll show you guys 2 ways that you can do it. So I'll fast forward the video and you can watch it, at your own pace. But essentially what I'm doing is I'm going to show you guys, like I said, 2 different ways to create the border piece. So we'll start on the border first, and then we'll sort of build up to something a little bit more complex. So let's get started by, first of all, taking this sheet. We'll go Control A, select the whole thing, and then we'll stick it down here, right in the middle. Now again, I did say that we're gonna do this. I'm gonna show you 2 ways, so I'll fast forward the video. Feel free to slow it down so that you can watch it at your own pace. But yeah, I'll be showing you 2 different methods. So let's go from here. Okay, so I've pasted it. Now what I'm doing here is I'm taking 16 out of 32 pixels and I'm putting them in their opposite corners. So you just saw then the top left corner I just put into the bottom right. Now this method, I actually don't know of too many people that use this method. I think if I were to be absolutely sure of something, I would say that I'm probably the only person that does it in this way. The reason being because this is quite time consuming. And you'll know that I did say that I was going to show you guys 2 different methods. This just happens to be one of those methods. Yeah, but like I said, I don't know of too many people that actually do it in this exact manner. Just because, look, you can see, even right now, it just takes way too long to do it. Now, fair enough, you could just say, oh, you can just cut off like, 16 by 32 because Photoshop does have a guide to see how big you've actually selected, like what area you've actually selected. But I don't know, it was just my personal preference to do it that way. So here we are, I'm just finishing it up, and you know, that's about it. That's about it for that. Done. Now you're about to see the second bit, which is just copy paste it 4 times, and that's done. Okay, so there is a difference though, and it'll be highlighted soon enough. Again, this one is with a grass tile. It's the exact same process. So, you know, it does depend on what you're making. That's the issue that you need to address, is that the more organic it is, I think the more freedom you have in terms of your tiling method. Like, this is one way to do it, and I think if you have a really well-made organic tile sheet, such as grass, then I think that you can take it pretty far, at least this method. And again, this I actually decided, hey, let's copy 16 by 32 instead of doing everything 16 by 16. So I did save a little bit of time on this one, but again, the methods are exactly the same. There really isn't that much difference, and with this I'm just sort of just copy pasting. Okay, so now we've just completed the full grass tile and the sandstone tile, and so we're ready to get started on the second part of it, which is transitions and border. So the process is kind of the same. There are a few differences, of course, but we'll go through that, you know, once it's relevant. So let's go through the 2 different styles that we had. So we have option A, where I sort of copy and pasted the full tile and then sort of drag the top corner and put that in the bottom corner, copy the bottom corner, put that in the top. And then I showed you the second method, which is just sort of pasting it and then just creating 4 clones of it. Here's the major difference. Okay, depending on the complexity of the tile. So if it's something super organic like grass, you can actually have a lot more freedom. So you can sort of mix and match the tiles a little bit and sort of really get rid of that tiling effect. The restriction to that, of course, is if you have something like pavers or rocks or something like that, you can't really sort of mix and match everything together. So it's a little bit more difficult. Regardless of that, I encourage you to try out both methods and see which one works best for you. So, you know, if you watch the video again, you'll be able to sort of get a good idea of what you should do. So, from here on, we're gonna start creating the transitional blocks. Now, it gets a little bit complicated, so I'll fast forward the video. Feel free to watch it at whatever speed you want to watch it at. But the first thing that we're going to create is a border, and then we'll create transitions. So I'll fast forward the video from here, and then we'll just get straight into it. Okay, so we've got our 32 by 32 tiles, and I've decided to go with the one that I actually spent more time on. So the first method, where I cut things up. And you can see there that I had an alternate one, but I decided against using it. Didn't really think it would be necessary for this particular video. So what I've actually done is I've actually put onto the 64 by 64 block, which would have already been done. And now I'm adding in the border. So like I said, we're going to start with a border, and I don't know, like I wouldn't normally create border pieces. I normally just create transitional pieces, but I felt that it was important to do it in this way, to actually show you border pieces. So yeah, like I said, I wouldn't normally create a border piece, but I guess just for the tutorial, I know some people would be creating border pieces. This is how you would do it. This is how I would do it. So I made a base layer first, so the darkest tone first, and then I started adding in the midtones. So now I know exactly what it's going to look like. And then underneath that border, I actually put in a shadow. The reason being because I want the border to actually look raised. And the thing is, because there's that contrast between the border and the actual tiles itself, it actually makes the tile look much higher. The border piece anyway, it makes the border pieces look raised much more than the middle areas. So that it's just one of those things that sort of fools the viewer's eyes, I guess, but it works. So that the shadow layer for that area was actually on a completely separate layer before I flattened it. So in case you're wondering if it was going too fast, then yeah, that's what I actually did. I created two separate layers, one for the border and then one for the shadow. Made sure that that shadow was dark enough to sort of make the border look raised, but not too much, not too dark, so that the actual tiles on the inside would look too flat. But here now you can see that I'm adding in all the little fine details. I think I've gone a little bit overboard in terms of details. But then again, it is completely up to you how you want to go about doing it. So, you know, if you had just a basic border, it would look too boring. But at the same time, if you have a border that's way too complex, you run the risk of the viewer, the player, and ending up seeing the environment more than their own character. So, you know, you got to be really careful when constructing high detail on scenery. I guess if you are thinking of creating a high detail sort of tile sheet, then I would suggest you use a less saturated palette. Yeah, a less saturated palette, but not like too desaturated, because again, pixel art does rely a lot on, or at least, you know, the manga anime style games, they do rely a lot on colors, on bright colors and good contrast. So, you know, take into account your style. I know I've seen quite a few games out there that use a desaturated palette. It's not my personal preference, mainly because I have a friend that's colorblind. So if they, you know, games like Fallout, you had to actually create a mod that boosted the contrast, because he really likes Fallout, but the contrast just needs a bit of work. That is Fallout 3, I believe he was playing at the time, but that was a while ago now. Okay, here is the grass tile, and this is the transitional block where we go from grass to stone pavers. That block that I cut out there, that's 16 by 16, and the reason why I chose 16 by 16 is that, one, it cuts away enough of the grass tile that I can start working with it, but then it doesn't cut out so much that I don't have enough to work with. I hope that made sense. If not, just leave a question in the comment section and I'll go into a little bit more depth. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually erasing parts. Oh wait, I don't think I've started. Yep, no, I started. I started erasing parts of the grass tiles. So the grass is actually on its own layer at the moment. And it stays this way for a major part of this section. Now here's the thing. If you notice on the grass tile that I have a particular direction, so the blades are sort of going upwards. And because of that, it can become quite difficult to actually mask that. I myself have not figured out an efficient way of hiding details. Hiding the fact that they sort of flow in a particular direction, but I have discovered a way to sort of mask it. And that's by doing exactly what I'm doing here. It's carving out. What I'm doing is I'm actually selectively carving out the dark details, the shadows. And what that does essentially is that it leaves us with the highlights, obviously, and the midtones. And we can actually recreate the shadows, the dark tones for the grass, so that it looks like it's flowing in a different direction. So yeah, the tones that I'm actually getting rid of, or I'm using my eraser brush, but it's a soft round brush, and it's about 1 pixel. I think at some point I did end up using 2, but I think I undid it. But yeah, what I'm doing here is I'm just selectively carving out all the dark areas. And by doing so, we can very easily influence the direction that the blades of grass will actually flow in. Actually, looking at it right now, I think I have a very different method when it comes to painting grass. Here's a tip: when you're creating a tile sheet or anything with sprites, have the first tile set that you create, use that as a reference. Because the thing is, if one tile works together, if 2 tiles work together real well, then you're on the right track. If not, then you can catch it early and you can say, okay, I need to make the changes here, here, and here. And that saves you a lot of time and headaches. Okay, this is where things get a little bit nitpicky for me, and you probably don't want to go into the kind of detail I'm going into, but yeah, I'm just carving out just along the actual edge of the tile sheet itself. This might be a little bit risky, especially if you don't know what you're doing, but you know, everybody learns. You'll learn your own shortcuts eventually, which is a good thing. All right, here's what I was talking about erasing the dark areas. See, now I'm adding in a combination of both dark and light, and I'm making it look like the grass is sort of creeping over the pavers or over the stone areas. And then I'm adding like shadows underneath to make it look raised, right? Because let's remember our painting basics, digital painting, painting in general basics. So if you put a highlighted object over a shadow, then it pops out more. So just giving it that contrast so it doesn't blend in. We don't want it to do that. If you notice, several times I actually did turn the grid layer back on. The reason being because, remember, these are still tiles and they are modular pieces, and so you want to be able to use them without having stray details. So just then you just saw me fiddle around with that one blade of grass, and the reason being because it was actually overlapping into another tile. You don't want that to happen, because just imagine it, you had a random green pixel where it doesn't actually connect to anything. You don't want that. You want to be able to mask that. And yeah, I'm just filling in details, constantly checking, making sure that if I need to backtrack, I can backtrack. And really, I'm just making like little touch-ups here and there, adding in extra blades of grass, extra shadows. But essentially, that's done. That's all of it. Finito. Okay, that took forever. So if you were watching the last bit in normal speed, I guess, it would have taken about 25 minutes. So if you watch that full speed video upload speed, then you wouldn't have had to sit through all that. So okay, so here's the final result. You can see it here. Now let's talk a little bit about good tile sheet construction. And I would say that this is an example of a tile sheet, but I wouldn't say that it's good tile sheet construction. So when I say good tile sheet construction, I mean, you know, group together tiles that you would normally have to use together. So for example, if you're building like a desert scene, you'd have your sand tile, maybe some desert stone tiles, and then maybe some, I don't know, maybe you have some buildings or something out there in the desert. You'd have all those tiles on a single sheet. Now, if we take a look at this one, again, this one's just a demo tile sheet that I got from RPG Maker VX Ace, one of their default stuff. You can see here that we've got some sort of like dry grass, some sort of savanna type tile set. And then all of a sudden we have, you know, lava and some sort of mountainy area, and then we've got some ice. I wouldn't consider this to be effective tile sheet construction, although from a certain perspective it wait, okay, so maybe not so much. So when I build tile sheets, I like to keep them in powers of 2. So that's 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, 1024, right? Powers of 2. The reason being because I can keep the shapes relatively similar. But it is up to you what kind of size you want to go for, but obviously powers of 2 would be the most efficient. Now here's the thing, because you've got all these different tiles, every time you load up a level, you'll end up having to use the entire sheet. So that doesn't really count as effective tiling. So what I would do to improve something like this is, grab this tile set and group it with, I don't know, this looks to be like a city or fortress type tile sheet. Group it with other tiles that would create a fortress-like scenario. Same thing with this savanna or deserty sort of tile set. You do the same thing here. Now, let's go create our own. So here we have the 2 tiles that we'll be using are this one here with a grass border, that's a transitional block, and with this one here with a sort of stone edge border thing. And that's what we're going to use to create our tile sheets. So let's get to it. Let's copy this, and we'll copy here. This tile sheet template is 128 by 128, and that's excuse me, that's what I would normally make the tile sheet sizes. Depends on how much detail actually needs to go into it, but essentially we're just moving them, we're just copy and pasting them here onto this sheet so that when we actually do move it into a game, it's all good to go. So we'll copy that, paste that down. Now here I've only used 64 out of 128. I've only used half the sheet. And this is where you can get a little bit creative, actually. You can, I don't know, we'll grab the original tiles here. Because sometimes, I don't know, you might want to say, hey, I want to use the majority of this sheet. Like, maybe I want to create a field of tiles. So, in that case, probably using this, probably a bit overkill. We'll instead use this. These 32 by 32 blocks. The reason being, wait, is this 32 by 32? Yes, it is. The reason being because we don't actually need to use the whole thing. We only need a certain amount. So we can just use this, and we can get away with that. It's pretty easy. We'll just move that up. Now, I can already tell that I won't be using the entire tile sheet. In which case, feel free to just clip it. No one's going to hold it against you. Yep, that's the right one. Control A. We'll copy that across, and that's that. Now, let's take a look at this. See these, how they're the only things that this block here is just these top ones? We're going to do something like that. We'll actually do that exactly. So let's collapse the entire sheet, and then we'll just quickly copy and paste these ones here. Really not that difficult. The reason why these extra tiles exist is because sometimes you'll have there'll be instances where you might need to use these extra pieces. Maybe you want, I don't know, maybe you just want to form like a U-turn sort of looking area. In which case, yeah, you obviously want to use a limited amount of space. So obviously, instead of having that, you can just have these blocks, or maybe you want to use these blocks on their own. It's completely up to you how you want to do that. The whole point is that you want to put in as much, you want to have as little white space as possible. And if this is one way to get around it, then by all means use it. I wouldn't even try to cover that up. But yeah, it's good contingency plan to have. If you think that you're gonna end up with a sort of unusual number, so like an unusual shape, or maybe you'll need an extra block or something, then it's better to be safe than sorry, essentially. For this one, again, we'll just use that 1920. I already went over 16. Don't need 20 pixels. Not for this bit. That should be it. Yep, that is it. And again, I'm just repeating what I was doing before. Not really anything particularly special or fancy going on here. It's just we're just filling space. So again, yeah, you just want to make sure that you use up as much space as possible. Group your tile sets, because one, it'll be easier to sort of manage everything, and two, it makes sense that you would do it that way. So that's what it looks like. That's what our tile sheet looks like. Now all this white space up here, that's 32 pixels of emptiness. You have a few options here. You can either create an extra block, which is just like sort of these that sort of do an opposite sort of transition. So instead of grass transitioning into stone, you've got the stone on top of the grass. So that's completely up to you if you want to do that. But in the event that you don't use all the space, you can just crop it. You know, no one's gonna hold it against you, and it's still power of 2. Because if we go if we turn the grid back on and we have a look here, it's still power of 2. It's 96. So, you know, 64 plus 32 is 96. So it still works. It still works. It's completely valid. So let's zoom out. That is our tile sheet. Now, when I would like to tick it off and say that yes, we have completed the good tile sheet construction. I'm going to put a question mark. I don't think I've covered everything the way that I actually wanted to cover it. But I mean, you know, it's up to you whether or not you think it was we covered it or we didn't cover it. Of course, if you have questions, leave them in the comment section below, because I'll be happy to answer them. Once again, my Patreon campaign will be starting very soon, so do keep an eye out on that. I would like to have your support so I can keep making more videos and making some interesting games with you guys as well. So please keep an eye out for that. Until next time, keep practicing. Show me your stuff. I'd like to see what kind of tile sheets you guys come up with, and I would like to give you my feedback. So until next time, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you all later. Bye.